All right, everybody, welcome into Sideline Fantasy. We are going to be covering week 5 of the NFL/fantasy season. And I'm here, like always, with my good old co host, Crimmy Charles. How we doing, Mr. 1 and 3?
About to be 2-3. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know. It's been a tough start for you. Preseason crown champion, and you're 1 and 3. How you feeling?
I mean, run into some tough matchups and guys don't perform well, so like my team's okay still. Just a matter of actually doing what it's supposed to do.
And you have another tough matchup this week, so I'm sure that'll be fun.
Oh yeah, 100%.
All right, so there's not a whole lot of trades or ads to look at this week, so this show probably will be quicker than previous ones, but let's get to it. So, when we look at the waiver wire, which goes down every Wednesday, for point totals, the highest one was Jameis Winston. Rob went after him, got him, spent 10 points on him. Um, again, I don't want to say he's hit or miss, but he's been doing pretty good the last couple weeks. 7 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, 380 yards both games. I mean, that's kind of what Peter was hoping for in the beginning of the year. That just did not happen. But that's there. Um, excuse me. Jimmy Graham was picked up for 9 points. He's tight end number 19. He was picked up by a lot of teams this week. Mohamed Sanu is one I kind of like. Picked up by Peter. He's had back-to-back double-digit weeks, and it seems like he's still in that kind of number 2 role in Atlanta, kind of fighting with, I don't want to say fighting with time for Ridley, but fighting for the ball with Ridley. Any of these really stand out to you, or all pretty smallish moves? Do you think Rob's Jameis Winston move, is he the starter there, do you think?
No, I feel like Rob kind of just went after playing the bye game. I'm pretty sure Dallas is on a bye next week, so obviously you can't roll out Goff. Probably he might start in this week. Obviously, I haven't looked at the matchups until this morning, but it would be smart. I mean, Dallas plays Green Bay. They're going to probably run the ball quite a bit to kind of keep that defense off the field or on the field and the offense off the field. So playing Jameis in what could be a high scoring game against the Saints for the Buccaneers or both teams is probably wise. So none of those moves really surprise me. The Sanu move obviously kind of a little. Not that he's playing poorly, just the fact that he was tossed around so early on in the year, and now he's kind of found himself, and Peter kind of got another guy in him. So it's probably the best one I've seen.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there was no that like went off this week that garnered a 25, 30 point dip into the free agent pool. So we'll see if that changes this week moving forward. There was only one trade this week as well. I know last week we had a couple late trades, me trading Julio or me getting Julio and the Kittle trade. So a little bit more action last week, but this week really small trade between me and Peter. Actually, sorry, me and Dave. He traded me Ronald Jones, running back from Tampa, and I traded him Calvin Ridley from Atlanta. Um, the main reason I did it was because I already have Julio. I'm actually pretty high on Ridley this year. And as much as Atlanta throws the ball, there would have been nothing wrong if I had to start them both in certain situations. But I usually don't like doing that, so I got myself out of that situation. I got Ronald Jones, who seems to be getting the brunt share of the load in Tampa. 2 back-to-back good weeks for him as a running back. And honestly, he's only had one like really bad week, which is week 2. Other than that, he's been doing pretty well. I think they want him to take over that role. He was drafted last year. He's a second-round running back, so I'm kind of hoping for the remainder of this season he's kind of got that spot, and it turns out to be good for me. What was your take on this trade? Nothing big, but what did you see in it?
It's essentially a move where you made it because you acquired Julio and didn't want two receivers on the same team, so you kind of didn't take the first thing you got. You obviously were able to make a move that helped both teams, but it was a move that was going to happen one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. No doubt about it. And it's not that I'm not high on Ridley. I mean, I still think that guy can be an 1,000 yard, 10 touchdown guy. I know the last couple weeks he's been struggling in comparison to his first couple weeks this season, but again, we'll see how it pans out. I can never pass down a running back that's getting, pretty significant touches. So that's why I pulled the trigger on that one. No talking involved in that trade at all. It was sent and accepted. Those are always the good ones. All right. Now we're going to move on to the matchups of the week, Krem. The first matchup, like I said, is going to be me and Trey, and I would argue this is probably one of the 2 or 3 most important games of the week. Looking at all the games and looking at all the teams, we're both 2-2. We're in the same division. Getting out of those first 5 division games with a winning record is crucial Only one of us is going to do it. He got off to a 36-point performance with Chris Carson and Gurley, so his running backs 1 and 2 are already done. 36 is a pretty good start. I'm glad no one went absolutely off. They had 7 combined at halftime, and I was really upset that they managed to get 36. But overall, looking at this matchup, what do you see? Who's key factor? What do you think is going to be big?
Well, obviously Thursday night played a key factor in the beginning of the week. Getting both your running backs over 17 is pretty solid. I mean, you can't really complain about that whatsoever. But coming down to it, it's going to come down to. I feel like there's a lot of names in here you can kind of say, like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Julio, this, that, and the other. To me, I feel like it's Matt Breida on Monday because the matchup is projected to be a 2-point game. And if that's the case and you're down by 10, 15 points on Monday and that's who you have rolling, he's going to have to kind of push you over the edge because at the same time you have Jarvis on the other side of the field. So that Monday matchup to me, with the projections being so close, is going to be the biggest part of this matchup, I feel.
Yeah, and he's already had Gurley and Carson going outside of the obvious of Mahomes, which I think that's going to be a tougher matchup for the Kansas City offense. I'm not saying they're not going to put up points, but that Indianapolis defense is pretty solid. I don't expect them to drop 40. Now, maybe they will now that I said that, but we're going to see. Outside of Gurley and Carson, who needs to push who do you think really needs a big game for you, brother?
There's 2 guys. First, and there's kind of all these guys here, but I'll give you 2. I feel like Duke Johnson kind of needs to show you something that keeps him in your lineup because he hasn't played the greatest over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, coming into the year, we thought he was going to be good. Week 1, he had 11 points, and then kind of fell off with 3-point performances the next 2 weeks, and then came back last week with 8. So this guy needs to kind of get more involved. Obviously, they have Carlos Hyde kind of taking away carries from him, so that's going to be tough to kind of get him involved in the run game. But a lot of the times with this team, Deshaun Watson's getting hit, and he's able to dump it off to a Duke Johnson or a Carlos Hyde. So you have to kind of just hope that Duke is the guy getting those dump-off passes. And I got to say, Sammy Watkins, like, he came out that Week 1 game, blew the doors off of the Jacksonville Jaguars with 3 TDs, and ever since hasn't scored double digits yet. He got 42, then had 8, 9, and 5. Like, that's right. You got to show something here that, and he's banged up, so it kind of hinders him too. But it just sucks because that matchup right there would have been nice for Trey if he had Tyreek Hill in there, much more appealing. But Sammy has to be that guy. He has to take over that role, and he needs to show that he can get over 10 points. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's a big one as well. On my side, I got a lot of good matchups in terms of my pass catchers. Kelsey, Gordon, Thomas, and Jones are all going against weaker teams in that regard. I think honestly a big one's going to be Josh Jacobs because Dalvin Cook, in fantasy terms, didn't get shut down because he had a lot of catches against Chicago. But in terms of running, he got absolutely shut down. So if Josh Jacobs could even get me double digits today against that Bears defense, I will be happy, but I also want the Bears to win. So if it affects the Bears winning, chill out. But I would be very satisfied with even 10 points from Josh Jacobs today going against that Bears defense. But we'll see what happens. So really big matchup, both teams 2-2. It's going to be a really important one this week. Divisional game. Winner obviously has tiebreaker all season. Next matchup is going to, and every matchup this week already has points on the board from the Thursday night game, so that's pretty crazy. Next matchup is going to be all in a day's work. Dave versus his buddy Jay, Godfather, who is, again, desperate for a win. The only 0-4 team in the league left. He's got 24 through 2 people, Brandon Cooks and Goff. So he's already got a receiver done, which did abysmal, and his quarterback did okay. What do you see in this matchup? I mean, again, Denver, LA is going to be an interesting one. Denver's defense has not been horrible, so we'll see if they can kind of contain that Chargers offense. I'm curious to see Eckler's workload. Now, not just talking about this matchup, talking about Dave's team in the future. If Anthony Lynn, the Chargers coach, is to be believed, Melvin Gordon is going to come back and take the brunt of that load. And that, to me, Dave's losing, in essence, the number 2 fantasy running back in the league. Eckler maybe will still be good as a flex option, maybe kind of his role that he was in last year, but Austin Eckler's the number 2 running back in fantasy right now. And if Melvin Gordon comes over and takes that job back, which we're going to be curious to see today, that's going to be a big hit for him. What's your look at this matchup?
Now, stop me if you heard this before, but the Chargers are going to be a big part of Dave's team.
Yeah, it very well could be, no doubt.
No. So like, it's crazy to say, but like the Chargers would be a big part of Dave's team this week. So obviously playing the Denver Broncos and having that turmoil with, Eckler's role, not knowing where he's going to be or not, is tough. So this game could be big because it dictates not only Dave's season as it goes. If he wins, jumps to 4-1 and he's off to a solid start, but that there with your running back situation kind of puts you in a position where you can run Eckler out there, sure, and hope that he gets, last year's numbers where he would get you 8 points behind Melvin, and you're fine at that point. But the depth there for Dave at running back, like you have Gallman, he is going to be likely out of the mix come Thursday because Saquon's coming back because he just doesn't have human legs. He's got some sort of robotic shit under his skin.
Clark Kent shit.
Yeah. So at that point, Dave literally on the roster has no other running backs.
I think he's in trouble. Roster. We talked to him yesterday. He does not think he's in much trouble. Me and you were both very low on Dave's team coming into the year because of all the trades he made, the way it was looking, his running back situation. Like you said, he's going to have Fournette, which honestly, up to last week, has underperformed. He's gotten close to double digits every week, but underperformed outside of last week. And you said Gallman's gone soon. He's not going to get any tick. And then Eckler's a maybe flex. I mean, what exactly does he do? I know, ring, he's been trying to maybe unload Juju Smith-Schuster for a running back, but Dave, who is very likely going to be 4-1, I think he wins the matchup this week, is going to be in trouble moving forward, in my eyes. We'll see, though.
Yeah, so there's that, but at the same time, like, you think he's going to likely win, but Jay's team off to a, somewhat lackluster start with 24 doesn't have the worst matchup. So you have David Johnson against Cincinnati. You have Joe Mixon playing Arizona.
I think both can do well.
Both can do well. So both can kind of give him a game like trades where those guys gave him 17, 18 plus, a piece. So that's a pretty good game from a running back. Stephon Diggs against the New York Giants defense. Who knows what's his situation? But if it's a full go and he's ready to go and they're ready to kind of just unload that team as it is, very good matchup for him there. Eric Ebron, he hasn't seen the volume that he saw last year, but at the same time, that's a matchup that you can see a lot of points being scored in by both teams. And you got Will Fuller in a good matchup. His kicker is a kicker. And then even Titans defense against Matt Barkley can give you points. Defense. We've seen defenses this year win games single-handedly. So I wouldn't necessarily give Dave the win off jump just because his guys are playing good defenses. You have Denver. You have Carolina. Houston isn't that great, but really his volume hasn't been, on par to what it was last year. Obviously, we want to see more from him. You have Minnesota with Gallman. Like, those games there aren't easy games.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think it's going to be – that'd be a big win for Jay and maybe even a bigger loss for Dave. I mean, I don't know. It's still too early to say anyone's out of it, but that's going to be a big, big loss for Dave because I think he's going to need as many wins as he can moving forward unless he makes a move on his team. And I don't know exactly what he could get on the market for Juju Smith-Schuster. That's still to be determined. But his running back situation is going to be in trouble here soon. As much as it helps Dave's Chargers that Melvin Gordon's back, it's a serious detriment to his fantasy team, no doubt about it. So it'll be interesting. Next matchup is going to be you versus Dana, another big one. You're actually projected to win this week. You're going against 4-0 Dana, Brady Bunch. who is the only undefeated team left in the league. He could very well start off 5-0 in division games and be set up amazingly well in this league, but you're not going to go away without a fight. You have 12 points on the board from Lockett. Not a bad performance. I'm sure you'd like 15, 16 from Lockett plus, but it's not bad. You're projected to win 109, 106. What's the key to this one?
The running backs. It's the key to every matchup. For me, every week it's going to be
Zeke might absolutely destroy that Green Bay Packers running defense if it's anything like it's been the last few weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, he might destroy it.
It's going to be. I feel like a lot of these matchups in this game are pretty solid. I don't see like anybody kind of standing out outside of Cooper against Green Bay secondary, which will be tough. Even Sutton against the Chargers secondary that has been worse off this year now can kind of change the way things go, and like it should come down to that Green Bay Dallas game because there's Zeke in there. He's got Cooper. He's got Aaron Jones. Like those are three high-profile players that are going to be in that one game itself. So the running backs for both of Dana and myself, I feel like will dictate the matchup.
And I'll tell you what, there's no reason to ever sit McCaffrey, so that's not what I'm getting at here. But McCaffrey is one of the very, very few players in the league that could say he's going up against the number one run defense in the league, and I'd still not be worried about him because of everything he can do. I mean, he will catch the ball. Even if he runs for only 45 yards on 15 carries, he might have 7-8 catches for another 60 yards and a touchdown. So McCaffrey, you see that Jacksonville defense, which has been okay to this point, but I mean, that's one guy I really never have to worry about in terms of fantasy numbers. But I think Adam Thielen's big. That Giants secondary's been horrible. I've still seen people say sit Thielen, or not sit, but one of the start him, sit him lists because of Kirk Cousins and how he's been this year. And a lot of people think Dalvin, despite the Giants being so bad pass defense, they think they're still just going to pound the rock with Dalvin Cook and try to win it that way. So I don't know what's going to happen, but this is a good matchup for Thielen to start going off, especially with the comments made last week. Usually when something like that happens, you see kind of a resurgent performance. I think you're going to need that this week, no doubt. Jordan Howard against the Jets. Did what we see last week, was that an anomaly, or is he going to continue doing that? I think for the most part, he's still going to split with Miles Sanders, but getting in the end zone a couple times last week did not hurt his cause whatsoever, and that's something to be on the lookout for as well. Big matchup here. I'm curious to see who wins this one. This is big. You didn't want to be 2-3 to start the year, but if you could start off 2-3 with a win over Dana and knock him down a peg to 4-1, big. It's really big because Dana's starting off 5-0 in division play. Again, we're early in the season, but that is going to be hard to catch. So, big game for both of you guys, and you're projected to win right now. So, we'll see if that holds true. Next game up is going to be Chad versus Kyle. Arguably the biggest matchup in the other division. Winner takes first place, if I'm not mistaken. Both teams are 3-1. Yep. Winner takes first place in that division. Kyle's projected for 96, which is kind of a low total in PPR. He had his kicker get him 6 points and Robert Woods get him 7. So again, kind of a disappointing start to this point so far for Kyle. But what else do you see in this matchup? Again, top two teams in the division going at it. Chad was 3-0 last week. A lot of people still saw him as the best team in the league, kind of threw a dud out. You still with me, Krim? If you're with me, I think your mic went out. Da-ba-dee-da. I don't know if you're still with me here. If you guys can still hear me, we'll get back to it in a second. God darn technical difficulties. La-di-da-di-da. Okay, I still see my thing moving on Krim, so I think you guys can still hear me. There you go. There we are.
Don't know what the fuck happened there.
All right. So, but overall, like I said, Kyle's off to kind of a shaky start. What do you see this week as being big factors? Again, Chad 3-0 up until last week, suffered a big loss to Torrey, but winner takes division lead. What do you see?
I see a glaring hole at running back for Kyle. I mean, you don't have the greatest, obviously a glaring hole with no Saquon and no carry on this
Yeah.
week. So, like, that's where the hole is. I'm not sitting here saying he needs to make a trade necessarily, but there's something there that could cost. The depth is there, but it's just a matter of the performance is not for both Hyde and Michelle. Those guys haven't kind of lived up to. Well, more so Michelle than Hyde. Hyde's kind of been a middle of the pack guy. You didn't expect a whole lot from him. For him to give you 9 a week is pretty good in retrospect. But obviously, Sony Michelle hasn't been that great. I don't know if it's his health or just the game plan itself. But this week, I feel like you'll see more of Sony, which could bite Chad in the butt because of James White being a primary pass catcher. If you're not going to have him catching balls, he's not going to run the rock that much, and it can kind of hinder him at that point. So it's going to be that for Kyle. I feel like Sony Michelle is the X factor there, but he's off to a bad start with those two guys on Thursday. I mean, Robert Woods didn't play the greatest. He had 48 yards in a game where they scored 29 points, and then your kicker gave you 6, which I think kickers need to give you 10 plus to be somewhat useful. So he's going to rely a lot on Sony and rely a lot on that Bears defense, but I do feel like Chad has the upper hand here.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, when you and again, me and you both weren't necessarily high on Kyle's team coming into the season, and you look at both lineups and you go, all right, Chad wins the game. I mean, that's just kind of what I see right now. But I will say this, moving forward, when Saquon comes back, when Kerryon Johnson is off his bye, you throw those two in Kyle's lineup, and then you look at the depth on his bench. Kyle, I think, is at that point in the season where he needs to make a big move and get another star. Because when Kerryon Johnson and Barkley are back, he has any given week Hyde, Michelle, Robbie Anderson, Peyton Barber, Marvin Jones. Any of those guys could be on his bench at any given time. That's a lot of depth there, and I still feel like he's missing one star. I feel like he's missing one more stud guy. I know he's been poking around a little bit, looking around. I think he's got to make that move soon. I think he loses to Chad this week, gets to 3-2, still in a good spot in the division. But we're not quite there yet. But I don't remember exactly when the trade deadline is. But around week 8 or 9, you can't be looking at your bench too much. Because when you get to the playoffs, week 14 and 15 and such, your bench does not help you. There's nothing on your bench that's going to help you in those playoff games. So you need to get rid of that bench and get rid of those stud guys that you can for a superstar, if at all possible. And I think that's something that's on Kyle's to-do list, and I think he needs to start thinking about it. We'll see if there's any desperate teams that pop up after this week. But as off glance, Chad looks like he has this matchup, especially with the start Kyle's had. And I think Chad's projected for the most points this week as well. Next matchup is going to be Tyler against Torrey. Again, a matchup that's already gotten underway. 2 people have gone for Tyler, his kicker and his defense. 13 it's not horrible for those 2 positions. It's not necessarily great either. While Torrey, on the other hand, Cooper Kupp is just absolutely cooking for Torrey this year. For not having Antonio Brown and for not having Le'Veon Bell last week, beating 3-0 Chad was a huge, huge win for Torrey. And Cooper Kupp got her off to an absolutely amazing start this week, getting 22. I mean, Tyler's team, again, me and you both liked it heading into the year. It's not looking good for Tyler at this point right now. Couple questionables in Edelman and Mack. McLaurin's questionable. He's really just having to throw bodies out there. Not really his fault with the way his season's gone. He's got Minshew starting at quarterback. Torrey's got a really good shot at starting 3-2. What's your look?
Yeah. Tyler's team just getting hit with a lot of injuries, man. Like, you lost Drew Brees for a while, so now you have to kind of look at a different quarterback. You lost Damian Williams for a while, so you have had to kind of scrounge together whatever running backs you can. Marlon Mack's questionable, Edelman's questionable, McLaurin's questionable. Like, if you have 5 guys that are out Like, you're not going to be able to kind of fix that if three of them are your starters. Four of them are your
Right.
starters. Like, you're going to have to rely on your bench, who's had to go to his bench for a lot. You have two guys who have played your kicker and defense, which giving you 13 isn't awful, but obviously you want your defense, when it's the Rams defense, to give you more than 2 points. And Cooper Kupp outscored both those things by almost double. So he's off to a garbage start for this week. The players he has and the matchup he has for these other players aren't the greatest either. So I feel like Torrey doesn't have it wrapped up, obviously, because there's nothing, there's nothing that we haven't seen before that's been nuts in having somebody come back and win.
Sure.
We saw it this season for sure, week 1 with you and Dave. But she's obviously off to a good start, and I just don't see much on Tyler's team that I like. Like, I don't look at, keying on one player that I'd say, you know what, this guy's going to play well. This guy's going to, perform to the point where he could save his team. Like, there's nobody here that I can see saving him.
And again, it really would be curious to see where he'd be with Brees and Williams in there, because that's big losses. I mean, there's no sugarcoating that. Losing Brees and losing Damian Williams were big losses for him, and he's off to an unfortunate start. But I don't want to say it's over for him, because that division, I still want to say, is pretty wide open when it comes to the second or the third best teams in the division. I still think it's wide open, and Tori's positioning herself for a 3-2 start, projected for 111 points. So we'll see if that happens. Next matchup is going to be Peter against Rob. I think, again, we talked about what we think are some of the bigger matchups of the week. This is one of them, I believe. You have Peter at 1-3, Rob at 2-2. Rob currently is the number 3 team in the division, so he would, if the season ended today, would make the playoffs. But here's the interesting thing: Tori's on her way to 3-2, and if Peter beats him, Peter's got the tiebreaker over him. He goes from 3rd to 5th just like that. Peter, who's been kind of scrambling, is all of a sudden just one game out of the playoffs. And it's a fun matchup here. I think this is, again, one of the bigger games of the week. Peter's got 10 points thanks to Will Dissly, and I think he would take that performance from his tight end. So I think he's off to a pretty decent start. If I'm looking at both matchups, here's the way I'm looking at it. On Eckler's player card, although Melvin Gordon is listed as the starter, it still says Eckler's going to play a lot. I think, as crazy as it sounds, James Conner against Buffalo, we'll see if he can put together another good performance like he did last week, and Melvin Gordon against Denver could make the difference on Rob's side. What do you think?
I did see a thing earlier today that showed that Melvin might be. How much I believe into that, I'm not too sure. So he could play a massive role. He could not. But Rob's running backs, to me, have tough matchups. You're playing in Buffalo with Derrick Henry. You're playing in Baltimore with James Conner. Your receivers are kind of, they've got decent matchups, but will those guys really save you in this point? But at the same time, Peter's team hasn't been playing that great either. You've got Baker underperforming. You got Odell underperforming because of a result of that. You've got, you're running Sanu out there now, who has been good, but I don't think that he'll be necessarily that good week in and week out if you're trying to get Ridley back into things. So, like, you've got a lot of parity here in these matchups, and like a couple guys that you expect more from and just haven't been giving it to you.
Yeah, and I think Sterling Shepard's going to be an interesting matchup against Minnesota. I like Shepard. I know everyone was kind of laughing at the acquisition a couple weeks ago, but I really like Shepard. I think when he gets into his role, he's going to be an 1,000-yard receiver. In the last 2 weeks, 22-13, going against Minnesota. We'll see how he does there and see if Daniel Jones can keep the magic rolling. Here's another big one: David Montgomery against Oakland. Is this the week? Yards-wise, David Montgomery is averaging about 60 yards rushing a week. Close to it. He's not really been getting in the end zone, though. Is this the week against Oakland? Bears, should win this game. Does David Montgomery break off for 20-25 plus fantasy points? I think Peter really needs that this week. And I think it could very well happen. So we'll see. But I think that's really some of the key people here. I think Alvin Kamara could absolutely take off on Tampa. So I think he's due for a big week as well. And he's been pretty hit or miss this season. 2 big weeks, 2 not so big weeks. So in big matchup, who do you think's going to win this one? Because projections have Rob winning by 5 in a close one.
Just looking at the matchup, I like Peter's matchups more so than I like Rob's. I can break it down by position. Like I like Rob's QB more in this matchup. I like Peter's running backs more in these matchups. I have to give the edge to Rob's receivers, although it's kind of a toss-up to me just because of Sanu's matchup. It could be a lot better than it's just volume-wise there too. Tight end, obviously, Dissly started the week off with 10. I can see Ingram getting to 10 as well, so it's kind of a toss-up to me. The flex, I'd give probably, if Melvin's getting his role back and he's going to run the ball, as he should at the beginning of the year, I'll give it to Rob there, but I don't feel like they're going to do that this game. I think they're going to kind of not ease him in, but they'll give him carries. They didn't give him any last week, so I don't know if they're going to just go from giving him none to all of them.
Right.
So that's kind of, hit or miss there. But if I'm picking a winner here, I feel like Peter will take it just because of the running backs. Again, it comes down to running backs quite a bit, but I guess the opportunity for points is more so there in both Tampa Bay, New Orleans, and then Chicago, Oakland over a Buffalo, Tennessee game, which would be very defensive, and a Baltimore, Pittsburgh game, which if Pittsburgh's down a bit, they're not going to be running the ball with James Conner. They're going to be turning to Jalen Samuel like they did, last week. So I feel like Peter probably takes this one.
Yeah, I think it could very well happen. Obviously that Baker ODB connection is going to be huge. I think that Monday night game is going to be a fun one. San Francisco, Cleveland. Is San Francisco really a good 3-0 team, and has Cleveland gotten it together? I think that's going to be a really fun matchup, and it'll probably, Rob doesn't have anyone going Monday night except for that San Francisco defense. So there could be a huge swing there if Cleveland puts up points. If that matchup is anywhere near close heading into Monday night, Peter's got it for sure. So big one there. Now, with all that being said and done, we are at 4 weeks into the season. We're about a third of the way through this fantasy season, just about. Is there what team so far through 4 weeks do you look at and say that's the best team in the league in terms of fantasy?
It's tough. It's tough because I feel like it just comes down to you can sit there and look at points for, and right now that's clear-cut Dana's team for points for. But at the same time, he's only up by 3 to Dave's team, and Dave's team to me now is not that great.
And here's something to think about. Look at now. I will say I think Dana's team right now is the best team in the league. His depth and everything he has. But look at those points against. He has not been going against teams that have been putting up many points. The points against him on average is like 90 points a week. There's honestly no one even close to him. His points against is 370. The next closest is 390. And then you have some people that have had 400, like me. I've had 460 points put up on me.
Look at my points.
Yeah. 480, and that's what I'm saying. As good as Dana's team has been, and I do think his team has been great, he's not had tough competition.
No. Obviously, if your points for are that high, you're gonna, you're probably likely gonna be 3-1 either way. Like we're not sitting here saying, oh, you should be 2-2 if you had, played teams that had better weeks. You can't control that. People say, I play great fantasy football defense. That's not a thing. It's a matter of those guys on that team performing. They didn't, so it's going to obviously show. And you can sit there and look at that, like a Dana's team where he's had 370 against and 503 for. So again, I feel like he would lose one game out of those 4 and still be 3-1. On the flip side of things, you see Jay's team, who is 0-4, has had 389 against. So he's not playing great teams, but his teams have been so awful. How he's 305 points for his team. The next lowest is Peter's team was 363. So he has 58 more points.
He's averaging 75 points a game. That's bad. That's in PPR. That's not good at all.
No.
In regular, that's not good. But in PPR, I feel like for the longest time, I've always been in leagues that were non-PPR. I mean, you're in that other league with me that we've been in for quite a while. If you put up 100 points, you're feeling confident. You're putting up 90, 95 a lot of times, you're feeling okay. In this league, with PPR, I feel like 100 is, I don't want to say lackluster, but you're feeling confident at 120, I would say, in the half point PPR leagues. And Jay averaging 75 points a week is just, I mean, when you go to, the famous breakdown that if you go on the computer, you can look at the breakdown and it says what your record would have been against every team each week. I think it's probably the best determining factor of how good fantasy teams are. That coach rating, I think, is stupid because if the coach rating shows who you should have played and your point total, and it generates how good you are as a coach based on who you played. Well, Dana is negative 152 because his bench is so goddamn good and he's still 4-0. So I don't really look at that coach rating. But the breakdown, on the other hand, I look at. And right now, Dave and Dana are both 34-10 on the breakdown if they would have played everybody every week. And Chad's right there at 32-12. Rob's 27-17. Kyle's 27-17. You're 20-24. And then you have Peter down there at 11-33, who won last week, even though he would have lost against every other team in fantasy. So he was 1-10 last week, and he was thankful he was playing the 1. And then you have Jay. And again, not to dig on Jay, but I have never seen a breakdown through the first 4 weeks that were as bad as his. I mean, he is 3-41 against every other fantasy team this year. 3-41.
Like, you have to look at it too. Week 1, you lost to everybody. Week 2, you lost to everybody. Week 3, you beat one person, which was me. I'm pretty sure when I had a horrible week. I think that was me. It might not have been me. And then week 4, you beat 2 people, that might have been me here because I had my receivers give me a total of 8 combined. So you've won out of a total of 44 matchups, 44 possible combinations of matchups with your points. You have won 3 of them.
Yeah.
That screams something needs to happen.
And here's the crazy thing, and Dave's been telling us this the last few days. His team on paper still does not look bad. I mean, when you have Goff, David Johnson, Joe Mixon, Brandon Cooks, and Stephon Diggs, that sounds like a really good top 5 tandem. I mean, it really does. And it's just not getting it done. And that's why I tried making a trade with him a couple weeks ago. Didn't want to do it. And that's fine. He's holding on. He's holding fort. But, wow. I mean, it is crazy how bad it's been for him. I mean, it really is. But we'll have to see what happens. I mean, and then I look at your team on the same end of the spectrum. You're 1-3, and you have on any given week. I mean, your quarterback situation's a little sketchy right now, but Zeke, McCaffrey, Thielen, and Lockett. I mean, how do you not like that going in week to week? And you're 1-3 right now. So it's fun. I mean, that's fantasy, right?
Yeah.
And I think me and you have discussed it with people talking trades and stuff. Too many people look at paper. Guys, you need to stop looking at paper. We're too deep into the season now for you to be looking at people's names. I mean, you got to start looking at production. I mean, production's going to kind of we're a month into the season now. Production's going to speak volumes, and I don't care if your dude's name is Joe Mixon. The dude's not playing good. You know what I'm saying? So it's tough, but we're going to have to find out what happens.
Yeah, speaking on a little bit of what you said there, people looking at the names. Like, I can go here and look at just running backs, for example. Coming into the year, people look at names and they think, someone like, obviously, I have 2 of the top 4 guys. So someone like Kamara, you have Kamara in there, and if you're trying to, and Peter's, if I'm Peter making a trade with Kamara. If I'm looking at Kamara's name and that's that, I'm looking at Mark Ingram, worse. I'm looking at Nick Chubb, worse. I'm looking at Dalvin Cook, probably worse. I'm looking at Eckler, for sure, worse, and then McCaffrey kind of on par. That's just name-wise. But all those guys I just named off have more points fantasy-wise than Kamara.
Yeah.
So you're looking at names, you're looking at guys like that. and saying, "Oh no, that guy's worse," but he's played better. His schedule going forward is better.
Yeah.
Even looking at like receivers too. Cooper Kupp, the number one receiver in fantasy right now. Would anybody expect that?
No.
No. Would anybody, would you sit there and say, "Hey, I'll give you Cooper Kupp and a bench piece for like a Hopkins"? People would scoff at that and be like, "No," but like
Right. I
that's
mean,
a
production's
steal though.
speaking for itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, and it's crazy. It reminds me, and I know we're talking a couple weeks ago now, so maybe you can't make that same argument, but the whole Greg Kittle trade that went down in our league a couple weeks ago, everyone was kind of scoffing at that. Like, how did you just give up or George Kittle for what you did? And I'm just sitting there thinking, it's not a bad trade. I mean, Disley, right now, I know he played Thursday night, so those points are counted towards his ranking. He's the number one fantasy tight end. And Dave gave that up essentially for past production from George Kittle. And I'll tell you what, I said it I think after the draft show heading into the year. I like George Kittle, but he had one great season. And I know he's young, so he's not been in the league very long, but who's to say he doesn't regress? Will Disley right now in that offense, I think he's going to finish as a top 5 tight end. They have nobody to throw to outside of Lockett. Disley's been absolutely tearing it up. I think that move is actually going to pan out really, really well for Peter because I think Sterling Shepard is going to be close to 1,000 yards this year. So Dave had the luxury and had the ability based on his team to give up those players, but everyone looked at that name and saw George Kittle, and they kind of, like you said, scoffed at it. Right now, that's keeping Peter alive. You know?
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can look at it too. Tight ends are the biggest kind of, looking at on paper. Travis Kelce is right now the number 5 tight end. Yes, again, you're going to look at on paper. You're not, if someone offered you, Will Disley and middle of the pack receiver, and to look at Kelce, like you have to almost consider that no matter what. Like, yeah, like the name wise, you're looking at the name and looking at the offense he's in, stuff like that. So obviously, it's going to be more difficult to grab a guy like that. So it's more so got smaller name guys like Greg Olsen. No one kind of cared about Greg Olsen, but Greg Olsen's been productive to the point where he's, I think, the number 6 for tight end. He's still getting you, it's hit or miss. He's getting you 5.6. He's getting you 14, 22.5, 1.5. But that's just the name of the game for tight ends, I feel. Those
Yeah.
guys kind of, what you're getting out of those guys. So trading for a Kittle on past year's production is fine. But at the same time, the unknown there with Disley is what you're giving up because you know that likely Kittle will be more productive.
And
Not
that
more
trade's a
productive.
perfect and that trade's
Yeah.
a perfect example of Dave kind of buying up and saying, I know what Kittle's capable of. I'm going to go for that despite Disley playing better. And that's kind of what that is. And another person you look at who I think is the best receiver in the league, DeAndre Hopkins, had 27 week 1, hasn't hit 10 since. Tough matchups, Jacksonville Chargers and Carolina. These next few weeks going against Atlanta, KC, he needs to step up because right now he's the 23rd wide receiver in fantasy. And if Torrey was to offer up, I can almost guarantee it, if Torrey was to offer up Cooper Kupp for DeAndre Hopkins right now, it'd probably get shut down because it's DeAndre Hopkins, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And we're
Yeah.
getting to that point in the season where I don't want to, I mean, it's your own team, it's your own prerogative, but we're getting to that point in the season where we're 5 weeks in, production is there. Like we are seeing firsthand what these players are doing this year. And if they're not performing, they're simply not performing.
Yeah. And you look at too, like guys like that tandem, and a lot of it's going to be on the Rams because they've played a game. But like a Robert Woods is wide receiver 10 right now. That's kind of, I figured he'd be in that 10 to 15 range year round. But you've played a game, you've done what you're going to do. There are a handful of guys. You've got Terrell Williams, who's I think he's 1.2 points away from jumping Robert Woods. Sutton, I think 1.6 or something like that from jumping Robert Woods. Larry Fitzgerald about 2 points. Ty about 2 points. Like,
Well, I
Terry
mean,
McLaurin. Like,
you've been dealing with the same stuff with DJ Shark. You've been trying to include him in trade pieces, and people are looking at him as a bench piece. Which theoretically, yes, he's been on your bench, but he's the number 11 receiver in fantasy right now.
yeah, that's the thing too. Like, it just comes down to everyone's looking at the person's name. Nobody knew who DJ Chark was before. Now he's kind of playing football. Now they kind of know who he is. But at the same time, I'm not trading a top tier guy for these guys who don't sound as good as on my roster. Like people are just kind of into that point where we're in the point of season, like you said, you don't want to sit there and have players that sound good on your roster that are underperforming. And this isn't a push by any means for me to kind of work my way into trades or whatever. It's just more so
Yeah, it
kind of
is.
it is, but also at the same time, people need to understand when it comes to kind of assess things on both sides of the ball. You want to, yes, you want your big names. You want, it sound cool. It look good on your team. At the same time, look into the production. Look into the schedules. Look into, can I, if I'm not going to play so and so, for 2 weeks, but I can play this person I'm getting for 4. Like that's the thing for me. I want to trade Chark. No one wanted Chark. That's fine with me. You don't want Chark, cool. I'm obviously not going to be offended by it, but now it's harder to trade players like that because they get in 2 parts of the schedule where they're more viable. They're playing weaker defenses. The likelihood of them scoring points is higher. So obviously it varies week to week, but the name, that's what should be varying. The name shouldn't be carrying all the weight. You should be looking at the performance by the players themselves.
Yeah, and that's why I'm a little surprised there hasn't been a couple more desperation moves by the teams that are underperforming. I guess you can kind of I don't want to say Tyler's move last week was desperation by any means, getting Mac and Hollywood Brown for Julio. But I mean, there is that sense of that if he's 3-1, does he make that move? Probably not. And I think some teams are failing to make that move that they need to make. I mean, I've heard some of the offers that have been given to Jay, and I probably would have jumped on some of those in a heartbeat to try to give that team a jump start. But it'll all play itself out. This is the fantasy season, and that's why we all control our own teams. And some people are super hard to try to trade with, and some people kind of have the same mindset. But everyone's got their own mindset when it comes to fantasy football, and sometimes it just doesn't add up. So we'll see. But with that being said, everybody, that about wraps up our Week 5 preview for the Fantasy Football Sideline Fantasy Show. Thank you for joining with us this week. We hope you guys have a wonderful week watching football, wonderful day. Good luck to everyone's fantasy team except for Trey's this week. So, any last thoughts, Jordan?
Nope. Go Panthers.
All right. Sounds good. Go Bears. Bear down. All right. Talk to you guys next week.